And joining us right now on that hotline, our friend Chris Biderman from the Sacramento Bee. Always great to catch up with you, Chris, and we thank you for your time. We started the show today with this question, Chris. What makes you the most optimistic, if you're a Kings fan, about the momentum they began this year continuing into next year and years moving forward?
I think it's what you saw from De'Aaron Fox, not only throughout the regular season, but what he did in the playoffs, really ascending to, a guy that could potentially be the best player on a contending team, right? There were questions about not whether he really deserved a max contract, but whether he could be that A1 guy on a winning team. And I think he took a lot of steps toward becoming that guy this year. Obviously, his play in the clutch, winning the Jerry West Award, but improving on defense, being more of sort of a tone setter for that team, just behind the scenes, and culturally and all of those things. I think De'Aaron really bought into what Mike Brown was selling him, and I think Mike Brown had a lot to do with it, given the credibility he has. That this is a guy who coached Tim Duncan and LeBron James and Kobe Bryant and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. So he knows what it looks like when players take those steps towards becoming elite. And Brown has indicated that he thinks Fox could become elite. Now, he did say, it's going to be harder from here. It's easy to, in Mike Brown, he said this all year. Really, it's easier to go from a losing team to a winning team, but the hard part is becoming a winning team that goes from 40, 50 wins to a team that can win 55 and potentially be in the mix for a championship. But in terms of what I'm most optimistic about from the Kings' perspective this year, it's that De'Aaron Fox could be one of those stars that we start talking about as a top 5 guy in the years to come. And that's ultimately what you need if you're going to be a championship contender. And I think the Kings could be on that path if they can continue to progress going forward.
As much as De'Aaron Fox sort of cemented his status that you're talking about, Chris, in the playoffs, Did Domas Sabonis raise any questions for you, or do you think within the Kings organization with the I would say disappointing series he had against the Warriors?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like there's the question about his contract and whether or not he signs an extension this offseason, which would ostensibly be far cheaper than he would be if he signed a max contract in the following offseason. I do think that's a big question. And part of me too wonders, like, were the Warriors just a bad matchup, right? Because we've seen the Warriors play a lot of centers off the floor throughout their run, their championship run in the playoffs. Like that's just sort of what they typically do. But they even did it to Nikola Jokic to a certain extent during the first round of last year's playoffs. But, if you're going to beat the Warriors, and who knows how much longer the Warriors are going to be at this level, right? It's going to take a center who plays better defense typically and protects the rim, and that's just not the type of player Domas Sabonis is. When the Warriors were scoring, I remember Game 5, they shot close to 67% on twos, in large part because they were just sort of parading to the rim and had a lot of open layups, right? And a lot of that has to do with Domas Sabonis' defense. He can improve in that area, and he can absolutely improve in his shooting. But, part of me, like, is it just a Warriors-specific matchup thing, or are other teams going to approach defending Sabonis the same way? And is he going to shoot with more confidence? That was something he mentioned in his exit interview with the media a couple days ago, was that he just wants to shoot more confidently. And if he hits those shots at a more respectable clip, I think it was 6 for 14 on mid-range jumpers in that series. If he hits more of those when he's left wide open, our defense is going to change the way they defend him. Does that open up more for the Kings 3-point shooters in the playoffs? And those are all questions. Like, Sabonis is proven to be an asset. He's an all-NBA player, but can he progress and get better to where he's not a liability in the playoffs offensively and defensively, which he was against the Warriors? I think that's, I think that's sort of indisputable at this point. But again, like he's not a player that, that you move off from in any, by any means. I'm just saying that I think there are levels to his game that he could still get to, that'll help the Kings in the playoffs more than they did against the Warriors.
Chris Biderman with us. Chris, how confident would you be in Keegan developing his ISO and his creation skills offensively enough to be a bona fide number 2 scorer next year?
Yeah, I think pretty confident. I think the ceiling is pretty high for him. There were questions throughout the year really about, is he just a spot up shooter or is he somebody that you can run offense through? And I think as the season wore on, he proved that that he could be a guy who could maybe do a little bit more off the dribble and maybe do a little bit more in the mid-range game and being more physical near and around the rim. I think finishing around the rim is going to be a big focal point for him this offseason. Improving his handle is going to be a big focal point. But I think given where he started as a rookie and the signs that he showed as the series progressed in games, 6 and 7 in particular against the Warriors, like he can be somebody that that could potentially elevate himself into that number 2, number 3 guy on a real legitimate playoff team. So I think Keegan Murray, that there's tons of reasons to be optimistic about Keegan Murray. You talk to people with the Kings, they love his disposition. They love just how even keeled he is. I know on the outside, like we joke about him not smiling much and not showing much personality.
Right.
But I think in the NBA, in some cases that can be a really good thing. You just know what you're going to get from Keegan day in and day out. He's super consistent from an approach standpoint. And you're not going to ride the roller coaster of, having a big personality or having off days or anything like that with Keegan. So I think consistency is a really important thing just from a personality perspective in the NBA. Keegan absolutely has that. He has the work ethic. He has a skill set. Now he just needs to get more experience, get stronger, maybe work on, agility and his handle and things like that. And I think he could be a really good player in the league.
What's the number one thing you think this team needs to add in the offseason?
I would say athleticism on the wing. I think Harrison Barnes has some of it, but he's a pending free agent, obviously. I would just say athleticism and length on the wing. The Kings play a lot of small lineups, particularly in the playoffs when you have Malik Monk, and Terrence Davis. Even when you're playing De'Aaron Fox or Davion Mitchell, Malik Monk, Terrence Davis, those are guys who are really guard-sized players, right? And you don't have a lot of length and athleticism on the wing. Keegan Murray is, he's a tweener 3-4 type player, but he's not a super plus athlete, right? And it's generally those super athletic guys who are the guys who end up becoming the best defenders. And the Kings just need more perimeter defense. So I would say length and athleticism on the wing, because they don't really have any of those guys right now outside of Harrison Barnes. And obviously Barnes is a pretty big question mark given he's heading into free agency.
Chris, great stuff, man. We always appreciate catching up with you. Let's do this again soon, my friend.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks,
Chris.
There goes Chris Biderman, Folsom Lake Honda Hotline. Folsom Lake Honda, your one-stop Honda shop. Did the 76ers make a mistake playing the MVP last night? That and more coming up.